Hi, this is video help for Chapter 11 Notes number 2, and we have 24 slides for number 2 also, and think of it as the next 24 slides, so it's a continuation of the last one, number 1. Think of it as slides 25 through 48 in that way. So by the time you're done with this, you will have 48 slides worth of information that'll help you better understand Chapter 11. So you'd click on this, right, to get there, and that'll take you to something that looks like this. So these are the general questions again for Chapter 11. We've covered it in our videos for Chapter Notes number 1, so I won't go over it much here. But always use these questions when you find yourself stressed or wondering why we're talking about it, why we talk about the concepts we do. Just remember it's for the benefit of these issues that affect us all in everyday life. All right? Right here, the first slide is, there's a link here, first of all, and you can click on this link, and it's kind of a fun challenge where you can try to guess the ethnicity of different individuals. And it's difficult, it's hard to do, but feel free to play the activity. Specifically for this task is in your notebook, you are to look at each individual, and you are to guess whether or not, or not so much guess as make a claim of whether or not you think these people have, let's fix this word a little, high, medium, or low. We're going to put a new word in here, nucleotide similarity. So one thing we're starting to learn is that the nucleotides make us who we are. The nucleotides shape our phenotype. And so if that's true, if nucleotides shape our phenotype, two individuals that look similar or act similar, we would expect by logic that they'd have a similar nucleotide sequence in their DNA, that their DNA in general would just have more common nucleotides, because our DNA makes us who we are, right? So let's apply that logic to this task. So here we go. So we have the task of comparing different individuals and deciding if we think they have high, medium, or low nucleotide similarity. It says explain each decision, but if you haven't already answered these, please just pick maybe 3 out of the 5 to defend with evidence. So for whichever 3 you want out of the 5, decide how did I decide if the individuals had high, medium, or low nucleotide similarity. All right, the first individuals are A and B, and that's A here and B here. Just based on their phenotype and the traits that they have, those that they inherited from their parents, right? Based on their DNA, do you think their DNA has high, medium, or low nucleotide similarity? And you'd make your decision, and you'd place it in your notebook. Look at A and F. A and F. Do you think they have high, medium, or low nucleotide similarity? How common do you think their DNA and their nucleotides are to one another, based on the physical traits they have? Let's do A and B together. So if I was going to explain how I would go about making a claim, I'd look at them and I'd say, well, their skin tone is different, so the skin color is different. That's one trait that's different. Their hair color is different. Their gender is different. We have a boy here. We have a girl here. Eye color, kind of hard to tell. Nose shape, a little different. So if we just went by skin color, hair color, and gender, I would say that these individuals have low genetic similarity. So for A and B, I would say A and B have low nucleotide similarity because their skin color is very different, their hair color is very different, and they have different genders. And your gender, your hair color, and your skin color are all controlled by the nucleotides. And because they don't have any of those in common, I think they have low nucleotide similarity, based on the evidence we have. That's what I would write. A and B because skin tone, hair type, hair color, gender. This is my explanation for my decision. Now you just continue for comparing different individuals here and determining whether or not, again, you think they have high, medium, or low nucleotide similarity. All right, let's move on. This is a slide that was from notes number 1 for Chapter 11. Don't worry about it. It is always a good review to better understand how DNA builds the body and how it makes the proteins of our body, which ultimately decides how we look and act. But if you've already done it, just go ahead and move forward, especially if you remember. Here's a new task. This is a table of information, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 species. It starts with Homo sapiens at the top, Homo sapien species, that's humans, and it goes to different organisms, and we don't need to know what they are, we just need to know that they're different species of organisms. And then if you look at the top row, it's species also. All it is a duplication of the same species, but made horizontal. So the same species are placed horizontally here and vertically here, and all the numbers inside tell the observer what the percent similarity is of the two species DNA. So based on their genetics, the nucleotides of their DNA, how similar are these species nucleotides? All right, so what we can do is we have Homo sapiens here, we have Homo sapiens here. If we line it up, where the Homo sapiens intersect, you see that they have 100% nucleotide similarity. And of course they do, because they're humans. You would expect humans to be 100% the same genetically. But if you compare Homo sapiens to another species, like this one right here, this one is, it's kind of hard to read on the side, but it's T. sativum. All right, no, it's not actually. It is T. aestivum or estivum. T. aestivum species is only 16% genetically similar to the Homo sapiens here. So remember, you line them up. Z. maiz species is 24% similar to humans. So if I go across this row for humans, we'd find that the species that has the highest genetic similarity is still pretty low. This species, X. lavis, has 43% of its DNA, the nucleotides, similar to humans. But that also means that there's 57% of their DNA that is different from humans. So there's more different than similar. The task is to remember that organisms with DNA sharing similar nucleotide sequences are considered close genetic relatives. So the closest genetic relative in this row to humans would be X. lavis, because it has the highest percent similar. So they'd be considered closer relatives than the species that has less, like P. sativum, with only 12% similarity. Okay. The task here, it says to do, use the chart like a multiplication table, which we've done already. It says find two species that are genetically similar. So using this table, find a number, the highest number possible. And that would tell you that, not counting the 100s. The 100s you skip. The hundreds are just when you compare one species to itself. And of course, if you compare yourself to yourself, you're 100% similar. Skip the hundreds and find a value other than 100, the highest one, and you would respond in your notes with that. Then it says the second task is find two species that are very different based on nucleotide sequences. So find the lowest number you can inside here, and that would tell you the two species that have the least DNA nucleotide similarity. And then you would document that. Just put the species names. All right, this task is straight out of your book. If you turn to chapter 11 in your textbook, you would find this question, and it'd be part of just the overall learning for the chapter. Our job is to answer each question, and we have 3 questions here. All 3 questions can be answered by this table only. So the challenge is, can we learn information from this data table? But what is the table? The table has 4 cell samples. 2 of the cell samples are from the human body, a human liver cell and a human thymus cell. And then we have herring sperm. Herring sperm is a fish, so it's the sperm cell or the gamete from a fish. And then we have a yeast cell, and a yeast cell is a single-celled fungus. Now, they've taken these 4 cells and they've found their DNA inside, just like you see in this picture. So they took DNA from each species there and each of their cells, and then they decided to measure how many nucleotides, the C, the G, the A, and the T, their DNA contained. So they took all the DNA from one of the cells from one of these organisms, from 2 different human cells, and a herring and yeast cell, and they found out that how much A's, G's, and C's and T's each of their DNA contained. These numbers inside represent percents. So what that means is, to give an example, it means, so for a yeast cell, 31.7% of their DNA is made of A nucleotides, just like here, the nucleotides, right? And you have your A nucleotides right there. So 31.7, so basically 32% of the yeast's DNA is made up of the A nucleotide. 18.2% is G, 17.4% of their DNA is made of C. All right, your job is to compare the amounts of A, T, G, and C for all 4 cells. Why do you think the relative amounts are so similar in the human and thymus? So if you compare the human and thymus, why do you think the numbers are so similar to each other? Because they are more different. If you compare the human cells, the human liver cells, to other, like the fish sperm or the yeast cells, they're not as close. But if you compare the human liver and the human thymus, they have similar amounts of A, G, C, and T. Why are they more similar to each other than they are to the other cells? That's what your answer is here. Number 2 is, how do the relative amounts of each base in herring compare with the relative amounts of each base in yeast? So you compare the fish sperm with the yeast, and you have to give one thing, just by looking at the percentages of A's, G's, C's, and T's, what's one thing you can look at this table and say when you compare or contrast fish sperm from yeast? A's, for example. What could you say about the amount of A's in the fish sperm versus the yeast, or G's? Or what could you say overall if you look at all of them together? And then what fact can you state about the overall composition of DNA, regardless of its source? So regardless of what cell you're looking at, what does the data say about DNA and how similar organisms are? So looking at this table, what can we say about all living things and their DNA? All right, the DNA replication page, it's important to know what DNA replication is. So if you want, I would write the term in your notebook, DNA replication, and you're welcome to write the definition here and try to remember what the term is we use for cell division when making gametes, like sperm and eggs. Don't worry about this question though, we can skip this. But it is important to remember from our Chapter 10 project that we did study normal and improper cell divisions. And the improper and the proper, what made them so different is whether or not the body was able to replicate DNA properly in the form of chromosomes. All right, so this is the slide we want to work on. We want to look at both of these images and interpret them. When we interpret these two models, what we are trying to do is understand what they're trying to say, understand what they're trying to communicate. So look at both of them. There are 2 different ways to show the same thing. Both of these models represent DNA replication. What I'd like you to do is look at one or both, and in 2 or 3 sentences, summarize what you can tell of how DNA is replicated, or how it copies itself, in 2 or 3 sentences, in your own words. All right. The next slide has videos to watch that are always helpful, and then a task. The task is how can image B relate or explain image A? So you have image A. A is DNA being replicated, transcribed into a molecule of protein, right? Special molecule of protein. And image B just shows an organism, a human, from birth to adulthood. How can we draw connections between someone growing up and aging and changing to DNA and building proteins? If you're confused, I recommend you watching the links to combine so that you can relate the idea of the body to proteins, or you can go back to this video here. If you watch this video again and you started at 1 hour, it'll talk about how DNA and the body are related. So good luck. The idea is to draw a connection between growth, aging, and changing throughout your life to your DNA and protein. So try to come up with a connection there.